As a parent or teacher, you've probably asked yourself why reading is so difficult for some students. Well, the answer lies in decades of research we now call the science of reading, and it's transforming classrooms around the world. Whether you're a classroom teacher, a parent navigating your child's reading journey, or just someone passionate about education, this episode is for you. I'm Kim Smith, and this is Dyslexia District. We're going to begin with a brief history of reading instruction in the United States. Early American schools used hornbooks, primers, and the McGuffey readers to teach reading through rote memorization of letters, syllables, and phonics. Reading was less about literacy for all and more about gaining access to scripture and civic life. Then, around the early 20th century, schools began teaching students to recognize whole words instead of sounding them out. The look-say method emphasized memorization of sight words with little phonics instruction. By the 1930s and 40s, we see texts like Dick and Jane with a reliance on repetition and memorization. The whole word method continued, and critics argued that it left many children, especially those with dyslexia, struggling. The 1960s and 70s saw a rise in psychological and linguistic research, which showed that phonics instruction improved reading outcomes, and the war between phonics and whole word began in earnest. The 1980s and 90s brought with them the whole language movement, which emphasized meaning-making, literature-rich classrooms and the idea that children learned to read naturally, much like they learned to speak. Again, phonics was largely left behind, and so were many struggling readers. Then at the beginning of the 21st century, a balance was struck. Intended as a compromise, balanced literacy blended phonics mini lessons with whole language practices. In reality, though, it often leaned heavily on leveled readers, cueing strategies, and guessing words from context. With this knowledge, states have been passing science of reading laws to move classrooms away from balanced literacy and toward evidence-based instruction. Let's start with a simple question. What is the science of reading? It's not a curriculum, it's not a buzzword, it's a body of research, decades of studies from cognitive psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, and education that tell us how the brain actually learns how to read. So what if I told you that reading is not a natural process? It's not something we come into this world wired to do. Unlike speaking, which our brains are wired to do, reading must be explicitly taught. And that's true for all children, but especially children with dyslexia or other reading difficulties. Dr. Mark Seidenberg, cognitive neuroscientist and author of Language at the Speed of Sight, explains that reading is a relatively recent invention in human history. Homo sapien has existed for approximately 300,000 years, but it's only been in the last 5 to 5,500 years that we've been reading in one form or another. Our brains weren't built for it, so we have to rewire them through instruction. Back in 2000, the National Reading Panel released a landmark report identifying the 5 essential components or pillars of reading instruction. They are phonemic awareness, which is the ability to hear and manipulate individual sounds and words; phonics, which is the understanding of the relationship between letters and sounds; fluency, the speed and accuracy at which you read with expression; vocabulary, knowing the meaning of words; and comprehension, understanding and interpreting what is read. These pillars are the foundation of what we call structured literacy, a teaching approach that is grounded in the science of reading. Now let's talk about why this matters. For many years, classrooms relied on balanced literacy approaches. These emphasized exposure to books, guided reading, and strategies like look at the picture or guess the word. But research shows that these methods don't work for many kids, especially those with dyslexia. Children with dyslexia often have deficits in phonological processing. They struggle to identify and manipulate sounds in words. If we skip explicit instruction in phonics and phonemic awareness, we leave these kids behind. Dr. Louisa Moats, a leading researcher in reading instruction, famously said, "Teaching reading is rocket science. It requires a deep knowledge of how language works, how children develop literacy, and how to intervene when they struggle." Let's look at a real-world example of how the science of reading can transform outcomes. In Mississippi, a state that long ranked near the bottom in literacy, leaders implemented science of reading aligned instruction statewide. This included mandatory teacher training in structured literacy, early screening for reading difficulties, and a shift to phonics-based curricula. The results? In 2019, Mississippi's fourth grade reading scores on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the NAEP, surpassed the national average for the first time ever. That's not just a statistic, that's a seismic shift. Mississippi's success shows that when we align instruction with how the brain actually learns to read, we can close gaps and change trajectories. So what does science of reading aligned instruction look like in practice? Let's break it down. It utilizes explicit phonics instruction. Here, teachers teach sound-letter relationships in a clear, systematic sequence. There's no guessing and no assumptions. Nothing is left to chance. They employ decodable texts. So these are books that align with the taught phonics patterns. They give students a chance to apply what they've learned, not just rely on pictures or context clues. And this is a big one. They use multi-sensory learning. Think tapping out sounds, tracing letters in sand, or movement to reinforce learning. These techniques engage multiple pathways to the brain. It also employs ongoing assessments. Teachers monitor progress in phonemic awareness, decoding, and fluency. Instruction is adjusted based on data, not just intuition. If you're a parent listening today, know that you play such an important role in your child's reading journey. It's always okay to be curious about how reading is taught in your child's school. Here are a few questions you might ask. How are students learning phonics and word reading? What strategies are used to help kids figure out new words? And how does school keep track of reading progress over time? If your child is finding reading tricky, know that early support really can make a difference. The science of reading tells us that with the right instruction and early intervention, many reading challenges can be prevented or greatly reduced. And if your child has already been identified with dyslexia, the good news is that there's a proven approach that helps: structured literacy. It's not just effective, it's essential for helping students build confidence and success with reading. Let's take a look at what the science of reading looks like in action, because it's not just a theory. Across the country, schools that have shifted to the science of reading are seeing powerful results. In Georgetown, Texas, teachers focused on systematic phonics and tracking real data, not just observations. Within one school year, the percentage of students reading on grade level jumped from 49% to 64%. That's huge progress in a short time. In Tennessee, one rural school district doubled the number of kindergartners reading on grade level in just 2 months after adopting the state's foundational skills curriculum. And in Kentucky, schools that began structured literacy and Orton Gillingham training saw the number of struggling readers drop by nearly a third, while proficiency climbed by more than 20%. These aren't isolated wins. They show what's possible when schools use evidence-based instruction and when teachers are given the right tools and support to make reading success the norm, not the exception. Harvard's Graduate School of Education emphasizes that reading instruction founded in the science of reading improves not only basic decoding skills, but also reading comprehension when paired with vocabulary and background knowledge development. Students who engage in deep word learning and content-rich texts show stronger transfer of reading skills across subjects like science and social studies. This means better performance, not just in reading class, but across the curriculum. According to the Lilly Endowment's literacy brief, students who are not proficient in reading by the end of 3rd grade are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. That number climbs even higher for students living in poverty. The science of reading isn't just about test scores. It's about long-term academic and life outcomes. The science of reading matters because reading is equity. When we teach reading based on how the brain actually learns, we give every child, regardless of background or ability, a chance to succeed. So whether you're in the classroom or at the kitchen table, remember, explicit, evidence-based instruction is the key. Let's keep pushing for practices that work. Let's keep advocating for students who need us most. And let's build a future where literacy is accessible to all. Thanks for tuning in to Dyslexia District. If you found this episode helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're watching this episode, don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an episode. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear about, please send it my way. I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at dyslexiadistrict@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Kim Smith, and this has been Dyslexia District, where we unlock the written word one conversation at a time.